an email from my son in Madison, Wisconsin, who had just tasted his first Canary Melon. He'd never had one of these before. And he had purchased it from a market called Brennan's in Madison, Wisconsin, that apparently specializes in sending teams of people out across the U.S., specially shopping for the finest and best tasting produce that they can come up with. He likes to shop over there. He said he got nectarines that were incredible over there recently. Anyway, I was listening to him, and I was glad that he finally tasted a Canary Melon. They're pretty darn good. I think Charlene's are probably one of my favorites. It brought to mind for me thoughts I've had years ago. I guess I've done videos on the tastes of food in the past, that I wouldn't want to try to claim that everything that comes out of my gardens and my fields here is the best there is and can't get any better. Well, that's not really true, but most of the time the produce I pick here is definitely ripe when we bring it in. That's important. And it's been cared for so that the stuff, has had the nutrients it took to grow usually. So typically the produce we have here is as good or better than most you could find anywhere. And some of it is actually better than any I have ever had on the planet. That's happened, yes. Yes, we had Fuji apples back in Fremont that when I left them hang late in the tree as the weather got cold, which was beyond where a commercial grower could leave the apples. Okay, so you couldn't be growing them that way. But when the cold had hit, the sugar in the fruit would concentrate in pockets called sugar spots in the fruit. It becomes slightly translucent. They were like concentrated apple juice. So sweet, so incredibly delicious. I'd bite into them, that stuff would just run into my mouth, and I go, oh man, there's nobody out there who buys their food in the supermarkets ever has a chance to taste anything like this. Every year we have thousands of pineapples out here in our field, mostly the Hilo Whites, which are known to be one of the better pineapples on earth. Well, we have a lot of them. I've lost count. They come and go. But every year we get a few pineapples that are, as I would describe, that at the beginning of time, in the Garden of Eden, in the middle of a meadow, surrounded by trees, there was a pineapple growing on its own, solitary. It was the archetypical pineapple that expressed everything that would ever be pineapple. Well, a few times a year we get one of those. Yeah, I mean, all the pineapples we pick are pretty darn good. Most of them are really good, but there's a few, no way to match. I mean, it's hard to predict which one it's going to be, but yeah, some of the food we bring in here is as good as any food I have ever tasted on this planet. Well, what I realize is that when my son had this Canary Melon that had been specially selected by some guys trying to make sure they got a good one, he was really impressed. Yeah, he had to send me a picture of the melon, He went back out, he bought another one, and so on. But he just loved it. And so that's what can happen to you when you actually get a piece of produce that tastes the way the produce can taste. Not just good, but incredible, because some of the stuff we eat really is very much that way. Now, I do remember raving over the broccoli. This year we grew Godzilla Broccoli. It's an unusual variety. It was chosen strictly because of the name, but it turns out they're very large, they will produce side shoots, and the flavor is exceptionally mild. Now in broccoli, really, in a way, the less taste, the better. Broccoli is one of those vegetables, like a cabbage, for instance, where the cabbage is mild. That's a good one, If it's got good sugar and it doesn't have a lot of bitters and terpenes in it, or same with broccoli, you got something that, you're going to go, whoa, this is this is good cabbage, this is good broccoli. Kind of the reverse is sort of true sometimes when it comes to fruits. A tomato needs to have a lot of taste. An apple, same way. But those of us who grow our own food, on occasion, I'm sure you've all had this experience of tasting something that was just like the best thing you have ever put in your mouth. That does happen, right? Yeah, I know it does. That's one of the reasons that I keep doing what I do. I can shop in the farmer's market. Most of the farmers around here produce a pretty decent piece of produce. I don't argue about it most of the time. There's a few bummer pieces, but most of it's pretty good here in the farmer's market. But if I go to the supermarket, none of that produce is good. I mean, especially not in fruit. Maybe if it's a mushroom, yeah, it's probably all right. Some of them are raised right here. A head of lettuce, especially the local stuff, so if it's fresh, well, lettuce isn't supposed to have a whole lot of taste anyway. Just crunchy, wet, yeah. So, some things you'll never notice. And a lot of America's popular vegetables, like the potato, well, I mean, how much taste does a potato really have? Not a lot. Or lettuce, for instance. These are things, well, they can get by. And you won't notice. Mostly the potatoes, you're eating them baked with sour cream and chives and salt and pepper, or fried with salt on top. You're tasting the oil and the salt. You're tasting the pan. You're not really tasting that much of the potato. Some caramelized starches. Yeah. So I think it might be one reason that artificial flavorings and additives, no matter what kind, whether they keep things fresh or add vitamins that are lost, add taste that's not there. Most of this comes about because of the kind of food network that we have. It's in a way, it's crazy because today we have availability of almost any sort of food at almost any time of the year. Everything used to be seasonal, it came and it went, you changed what you're eating. Not anymore. You can eat, if you want to eat radishes, tomatoes, and bananas every day of the year, you can do that now. Because food's being moved everywhere. But in order to do that, a lot of it has to be picked in such a state that it's, really not going to be that good when it gets to your table. You have all the food in the world, more food distributed over more of the earth than we've ever seen in human history. And you know what? Most of it tastes like sawdust. And the rest of it, they have to fortify it with vitamins and additives because it's, either so heavily processed or the fields are deficient in nutrients or whatever. This is really true, Look at the labels. Look at the stuff. Take a bite. Go on out there in your orchard and, pull down a well-ripened tangelo or an apple or a raspberry, whatever it is where you're at, a blueberry. Take it down and taste it. Then go back to the store and pick up one on their shelf and give it a taste. I'm sure you don't really need to do this comparison because most of you know this if you're watching the channel already. But artificial flavors, in a way, are taking over the palate because the natural flavors are disappearing. And so stuff's bland, it really is. A lot of it hard, bland, there's children grown up today that think that raspberries are sky blue and taste like something out of a laboratory. Anytime somebody says sky blue raspberry, I cringe. Raspberries must be either purple, red, or yellow, maybe white, not blue, It's not even a natural food color. There are very few blue foods out there. Bluefin tuna's got a blue skin, but it ain't blue when I eat it. Yeah, so this artificial flavor thing, I'm sure there's a lot of people who don't even have any real idea what food actually tastes like. Especially the kids, the ones grown up in those generations, where things became laboratory experiments on the table rather than, produce from the garden. I remember one year, having a crop of sweet cherries in California on my Stella tree, compact Stella. Oh, I had so many cherries. Well, sweet cherries, what do you do with them? I mean, you can eat them fresh, but they're really not, the sweet cherry is not what we use for processing. And so it's pretty much, you could eat it fresh, or maybe you could dehydrate it and eat dried sweet cherries. And I guess you could press it to sweet cherry juice. 1, 2, 3. It's probably the best use of the stuff. But so I took down some of those cherries and I said, you know what? I want a cherry milkshake. I threw some vanilla ice cream in the blender. I whipped some milk in there, and I pitted a whole pile of cherries. I dumped them babies in the blender, turned it on, let her go, And okay, well, I got my milkshake. Take a pull of it and went, tastes like a prune. This doesn't taste like a cherry milkshake. Duh. Well, of course, I knew that. Cherry flavor, as we know it, actually is ordinarily bitter almond extract. When you have something that tastes like cherry, it's usually not cherry. Now, if it has cherries and it does taste like cherry, then it probably came from the pie cherry or sour cherry, tart cherry, Montmorency cherry, a lot of names for this thing, but it's the red cherry, the one they grow in Michigan, or in Door County, Wisconsin, and so on. That's the cherry if you got cherry preserves, a cherry coffee cake, a cherry pie, or a cherry milkshake, by the way. That would be the flavor. That cherry has the taste that we identify as cherry. The sweet cherry actually doesn't. So by and large, most of you who, eat cherry and think you know the flavor, most of us don't know the flavor of a cherry. It's that weird, That's how weird things are. Yeah, so it looks like, though, that someone has finally figured this out. When all the food we have available is pretty much the quality of sawdust in the mouth, we got somebody, more than one somebody out there, who is now realizing if we focus on flavor, there'll be people that are going to pay premium to get this stuff. Now, isn't that sad, really, in a way? I mean, it's good that you can get a good tasting canary melon. That's good. Most of them don't taste right. So, but actually, he pays a premium to get these things, and it's a specialty store, You got to actually go to a specialty store and pay extra if you want a nectarine that actually tastes like a nectarine's supposed to. Yeah, that's nuts, but it's true. I have kind of an attitude about what I call space station gardening. That's where you will take a crop that ordinarily will not grow in your environment, and you make arrangements somehow or another with greenhouses, heaters, to be able to get that crop so you can get it through to produce. Now, I have a long history with this because, if nothing else, we had property here and in California, and I'd commute back and forth constantly. And so I was always moving tropicals into California, from seed or from cuttings, and growing tropicals, guavas particularly, pineapples, Anyway, what I found out was that, yes, I can successfully fruit a pineapple in the Bay Area of California. I can grow a guava, for instance. There's a lot of things I figured out. Bananas, for instance, that there are certain varieties that will work. Most don't, but some will. But for the most part, that was very disappointing. There I am. I got this pineapple. Hey, I made it. Look at that. We grew a white pineapple in California. You bite into the thing and go, oh, well, this doesn't taste like the one we get in the Hawaiian sun out in the field under the rain. It just didn't. The guavas. I get a couple of guavas every year, maybe ripen in the middle of summer that came out just right. But it was a handful. Most of the rest of it came out during the winter. The skins cracked. Flavor was off. Nothing was ever to the quality that the fruit would develop when it was in a proper climate. And all the time I hear people wanting to do what I call space station gardening. They see our vanilla here, they see our pineapples, and they're in Minneapolis and they want to grow pineapples. Well, fine, it's a project. Have fun with it, but do not ever expect that Minneapolis pineapple to taste like the one that grew here in this field in Puna. It's not going to happen. Uh, there were a few surprises for me. Macadamia nuts. I found out that with Beaumont variety, for instance, it would grow really large crops of mac nuts in California, and they were very good quality. And so some things did work. I found out that some varieties of bananas actually produced really good quality fruit and were hardy enough in the Bay Area. Most were not. And so the vast majority of the banana experiment was a complete washout. But there were a few. Nemois was one, for instance, that did pretty well there. Yeah, so, here you got a situation where I think right now half the planet is chomping at the bit to try to grow things in areas where the things won't grow. That's been my observation. I see tropical fruit growing as a current trend. To be polite, I say it's a fad because it's going to go away mostly. Most of you will probably figure out that you're better off raising apples. And that's my message, really. I'm not saying you shouldn't do the stuff. It's fun. But if you really want quality and you really want what you can actually get out of produce, you need to be working with plants that are very well adapted within the environment you live in, because those plants are going to produce the absolute best quality. They will. And a half-arse pineapple compared to a really good apple, they don't add up. The apple's superior if it happens to be a really high-quality fruit, and the pineapple's, That's kind of what happens when tropical plants are brought into temperate climates. I have the reverse problem here, bringing temperate plants into tropical climates. Although, lucky for me, it isn't so much the quality of the produce, it's just the plants themselves go, "Oh, Bill, you're nuts. What are you bringing me to Hawaii for?" They don't want to produce properly, a lot of them. Some do, though. Blueberries out here. You get some blackberries and raspberries around. Kind of temperate fruits for the most part. So anyway, aloha, y'all hang loose. Find something good to chew on for lunch.